And we are back. And y'all, the guest I have today, and yes, I'm going to tell on him. He's a busy guy. And he's like, he was asking me all these questions about being on the podcast. And I was like, listen, it's going to be just fine, but you don't have to do it. But he's here. And I'm so excited.
I'm
And
here.
his name is Keith Bevans, AKA K-Bev, AKA my friend of many, many years now. And
Indeed.
I'm super happy to have you here. Keith, how are you? How are you?
I'm feeling good. It was a little rocky for a few days, but I'm feeling good and I'm happy we're able to make this work.
I am too. I am too. And I know, jokes aside, and we may have a lot of jokes because Keith has this kind of humor about him that's a little sly. It's a little, you may like, oh, that was a joke. Yeah. And so we may crack a little bit of jokes here or there, but I think Keith is a really, from the outside looking in, I don't know all the details of his inner life, but I think he's doing some really amazing things. So I appreciate you
Thank you.
coming on here. And, the podcast is Finding Your Voice After 40. You don't have to share your age. Are you one of these people who shares your age, or are you one that, nah?
People try and do the math on LinkedIn anyway. I turned 51 in exactly about a month.
Yes, you have a birthday. He's a Taurus. Okay, so I talk astrology on here. So those of you who are Taurus family, I loved, you know what? And I didn't say this to you. I love Taurus energy. I think Taurus is one of my favorite energies because of its stability and its resourcefulness, but yet creative. And I
Lucky
like
me.
that. I know.
Better than being one of the ones you don't like.
No, I'm like, I don't really like, no, there's no sign because technically we have every sign in us, but we're not going to talk about astrology today. We're going to move on and we're going to talk about you. I want to read something first to you though. And after I read it, I'm going to really start asking my questions. So I just want you to sit back and listen for a moment. All right. Keith Bevans is a partner and executive VP of Global Head of Consultant. I said this wrong. Executive VP at Bain and Company. Yet, at this time, he is on sabbatical, exploring travel, storytelling, and the home life of diverse perspectives and cultures around the globe. He hosts 2 podcasts, Beyond the Bio podcast, and his most recent launch, which you guys see scrolling across here if you're on YouTube, My Home is Special, which is a travel photo podcast project where guests share the special things about their home before Keith pays a visit. Husband and father of 2 adult sons, Keith is also a photographer that looks for off the beaten path subjects, including hip hop culture, street performances, concerts, festivals, and other subcultural happenings across the globe. So Keith, you are like a Renaissance dude because we've got the artist in you. I messed up your title, so please say your title at Bain so that Bain is getting their respect.
Yeah, it's interesting. So I was promoted to partner in 2008, but I'm an executive vice president of global consultant recruiting.
There we go. I was trying to say that, and then I said, that might not be true.
Close
Anyway,
enough. Close enough.
So you've got this like very corporate level space, but then this extremely creative space. So hearing me kind of read those 2 very quick dynamics about you, as well as a family, obviously you also have a family. How does it feel hearing all of
that? Humbling. It's surprising. I think people who talk about accomplishments, I tend to think of accomplishments as validation of your potential. And so it's not that you've done something and you're finished. It's that you've shown that you can do more.
Ooh.
And I try and roll with that. And so I've done some things that are pretty cool and achieved some things that are pretty cool, but those are just indications that there's more to come.
Okay, so you have to repeat that quote. The last thing
I don't
you
remember
said.
it. I just made it up.
I know, but it was so good. Okay, so I have to rewind it, because that might be something that might have to be part of your title.
No, but it's just the idea. It's the idea more broadly that when I see people celebrating accomplishments, they graduate from this or they get that, I'm like, that's good, but your degree is just an indication of your potential. It's validation that you're ready to go do something more. And you shouldn't necessarily celebrate the milestone. I mean, it's worth celebrating and acknowledging, but it doesn't mean you finished. It means you're ready to start.
Right. Hence, this life after 40, we can't accumulate all these years just to be finished.
Right.
It's like, no, this is now the time to really like, you got all these experiences, to like now even build upon. So, okay. So I
Yes.
really love that. So speaking of life building up to 40s, I've
Hmm.
been doing this lately where I've been kind of carrying people a little bit through the decades of their life before we really focus on this 50-year-old self that you are. But if you reflect back to your 20s, if you can
Hmm.
remember, now I know people are like, I can't remember. That would have been the decade of the mid 90s, to the early 2000s or what have you. Who was Keith then? Who was that 20-year-old man?
Well, he was married. I got married relatively young. I met my wife when I was 17. So
Oh,
we met a long
wow.
time ago. And,
Yeah.
I would say that if you talk to people who knew me back then, they would say I haven't changed much. And they would say my sons reflect parts of me for sure. I was pretty motivated and had some pretty clear goals in mind. In my head, for some reason, reading Black Enterprise in high school, I decided that I would go get a master's in 5 years and then go back and get my MBA because one of these articles I read said something about entrepreneurs who start businesses with MBAs tend to be more successful than those without. And we had so
Mm,
many, frankly, failed businesses in my family that I was like, well, then I should go do that.
mm, mm.
I ended up enrolling at a college that didn't have a 5 year master's program. So I'm not sure exactly how I reconciled that in my head, but they started the 5 year program my junior year. So somehow it worked out. But I had in my mind that I was on this path where I was going to basically go get a master's in 5, work for 2 years, go get an MBA, and then be a free agent at 30, which is literally how 18-year-old me thought about things. And people who
Wow.
met me sort of would probably say that I was clearly like, y'all weren't distracting me from what I was trying to do.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's interesting when I first met you, and I think I met Tasha because it's the way that I know Keith is through his wife first.
Right.
Then he came into the picture,
Right.
because ladies were like, oh, is that your husband? But then I don't even know.
I
I was starting
photographed
my
one of your
music
shows.
career. Yes, I was gonna say it. I don't know if you. I think you kind of asked or you didn't at the first one that you shot. I don't know if you even asked or you were just there or like you were
I
gonna
just rolled.
come. That was the outdoor. Yeah,
I
I
like
think
to
you just
capture
rolled up.
moments. Yeah. I like to capture the moments.
And I'm like, wait a minute. So wait, Natasha, what does your husband do? Like, I'm like trying to understand this. But I will say in meeting you, yes, there's, I feel like I said earlier, the cerebral, I will call it, but yet the creative. And I know that that's something that I relate to a lot because I know in a lot of
Hmm.
spaces I have to be very cerebral and plan and understand
Right.
how I want my life to be. But then being a creative that can topple. So you were a father and a husband very young. And was that stressful,
Yeah.
Keith? I mean, was that uh, it just felt
No,
natural? Like, no, this is fine.
we laugh about it because we see these movies and on TV where the guy's getting married and he's, backstage, behind, before the ceremony with his boys, like, oh, I don't know, I'm nervous. And we didn't feel that, at least I didn't feel that at all. If you
Wow.
feel like you're doing the right thing, then what's there to be nervous about?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
And
And
I think
I didn't view it as like a big life changing thing. I was like, I'm marrying the person I'm supposed to be with. So let's get on with it.
see y'all listening, those of us who have struggled, and I've been very transparent. I'm no longer married. I did not go to the altar in my 20s feeling clear.
Yep.
And so I think that yes, that's how we should show up. But a lot of times in our 20s, we don't really know. But clearly, like you said, this was something that,
Yeah.
you're not doing things just to do things.
No, and it
So
wasn't
I really
stressful. And
appreciate that.
Kenya, I don't want to mislead people either. We were fortunate to have our kids sort of. My wife was a project manager professionally. They were sort of right on schedule, which isn't always the case for people. So we were blessed.
Yeah.
We were blessed that it was very easy. We said now is a good time, and 9 months later we had kids,
Yeah.
and we had our first while I was in business school. So the August before the second year is when he was born. So we had it
Mm,
at a time where it was arguably a pause in the careers. We had both sort of left corporate. I was in school, she was home. And so it
yeah.
was early on one dimension, but it was perfect timing on a lot of other dimensions for us. So not
Yeah.
stressful
Yeah.
at all, except, the midnight feedings when I'm supposed to be in class the next morning.
I was gonna say going to grad school and having a new baby and having all the things. I mean, I think it can throw, but I think when you are in your 20s, there is this kind of, there's naivete that it's like, well, it is what it is. And, I know for myself, it was like, I got married in my 20s and I didn't have my first child till I was 30, but
Yeah.
still, like it is what it is. This is what I want. And I will say with my children, I too, I feel very blessed. We planned them. They came kind of on schedule.
Right.
But according to, whatever society. But so speaking of 30s, anything shift when life started to, mature and go into your 30s?
I don't remember thinking like there's a big shift. I see again people celebrating milestones, and I'm my 20s are done and I'm 30 now. We don't really do that.
Yeah.
We for a bunch of different life reasons and experiences, we don't celebrate the milestones. Our anniversary, we might go out to dinner. We don't do anything
Mhm.
special for birthdays. We don't wait
Yeah.
for milestones to buy things because we've just had people, unfortunately, that have gone way too soon.
Yeah.
And and so the 30s was just another birthday in some ways. I think
Yeah.
Tasha threw me a surprise party, which I don't like surprises, so that didn't work out well. But then, true story, I did not throw a surprise party for her on her 30th, which was a problem, and I actually had a business trip,
Oh.
so the limo came out front, and she kind of was like, "Are we ready to do this?" And I was like, "All right, I'll see you later," and I got in the limo and left. Um,
Oh.
Kenya, I heard about it on her 40th. I mean, like it
Oh, I'm
literally,
sure.
it was a 10-year mistake. My 30s were a lot of work and a lot of raising, young boys, um,
Yeah.
which meant all
Yeah.
the things. It meant AYSO soccer. It meant working a lot. I was traveling a decent amount for work and trying to put in that grind on the job, deciding whether or not I wanted to stay at the firm. 30
Mm.
was when the plan expired. Once
That's
you
right.
once you get the degrees and you finish your MBA and you have a commitment and the commitment's done, then you're like, well, now what?
Now what?
Um, and I had the first of a couple, but a bad review heading into a promotion window where I sort of said, you know
Oh.
what? I get phone calls all the time. I don't need to be here. If you all don't think I'm great, then I'm out. And so I spent a lot of time interviewing. And
Mm.
in my early 30s, around the time that I was deciding whether or not I wanted to stay at the firm. So that was
Wow.
a little bit of a tricky time.
That is tricky because you are at the same firm when you as you're speaking of, correct?
28 years in July.
Wow. Okay, so I want to talk. All right, so I'm going to go a little bit out of order
Okay.
because the curious bee that I am was were you raised in an environment that also was just such a very stable space? So this is just all you know, or was it something very different? And like I'm like, where did this come from? Was this just an innate, or was it further conditioned by family?
No, I don't know. Honestly, I think my parents separated when I was in sixth grade. So my sister and I were raised with my mom. My dad moved first to the DC area and then lived in Central America. He's from Belize, so he went home. And he
Oh,
was bouncing back and forth between Belize and Florida for a lot of my high school years.
mm,
So I don't know. I think part of it comes from just not feeling like you have a safety net. And so,
mhm,
there's a part of me that said, if work didn't work out, I don't know that I could have called home to get them to cover my rent.
mhm,
If
mhm,
if I did something that was dumb and cost myself, tons of money, I didn't have a bailout plan. And so
mm,
staying the course and staying disciplined, made sense to me.
yeah,
Now we're fortunate now that my son's generation can take some risks, and he works at a startup and has a startup, and he can do that because at some level we have his back. And when I
yeah,
graduated and started working, I met a lot of people who had that safety net. They were talking about their retirement investment plans at 22, whereas, my dad was
mm.
encouraging me with the best that he knew, but, he's telling me to invest in my baseball card collection and stuff like that, which turns out not
Right,
to be
right,
necessarily a sustainable plan. And so
right.
I think a little bit of it came from realizing that, like, if I don't get this right, there is no going back. So take your time. Kenya,
Mm.
we're roughly the same age, and I
Yeah,
have
yeah.
two electrical engineering degrees from MIT, and stayed put during the dot-com bubble, whereas all of my friends
Mhm.
were running to the Bay Area to be, internet millionaires, and I was on the internet in the 80s.
Yeah,
Literally, I
yeah.
ran a bulletin board system in school, and so I just felt like I'll get where I'm going if I just stay the course. I don't need to go roll big and try and get there 10 years sooner like a lot of my friends were. And
Yeah.
luckily it worked out, but a little bit of it came from not feeling like I had the opportunity to make those types of mistakes.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you for that context because I think sometimes people make assumptions that oh, he's that stable because home, was like that. And it's like, no, a lot of times, like you said, as a result of home maybe not having certain things, then I know I need to go in this direction to make that happen. So now this creative in you, I want to know when did this, was this always there and you just I mean, how did that emerge?
So creatively, let's be clear. I take photos. Um, I can't sing. I can't dance. I like to say I'm breaking down stereotypes over here. Um, and I'm a consultant, so I can get really creative in PowerPoint if you want me to be. I could kill a slide presentation.
That is creative. Go ahead.
Right? It's just like people like there's just not generally like it's not the party conversation starter that you want. I've always been the guy with a camera, right? I was just talking about this with one of my high school classmates last night, ironically, but I have photo albums upon photo albums from the late 80s, early 90s because I always had a camera. And we got to college, I always had a camera. When Facebook started, Kenya, I scanned a bunch of photos from our dorm and posted them in an album, and everybody was like, "Yo, chill out, man."
I know.
I had all the blackmail photos downstairs on my bookshelf.
Yes, yes.
And I got a more serious camera when my first son was born. So at this point, a little over 20 years ago. And it's kind of grown from there. Digital made it a lot easier. But like who I am and who you describe me as, I did a lot of reading, a lot of studying. My workflow is like crazy tight. And I do a lot of things that are very disciplined when it comes to photography, but it's a neat outlet for me. It's the mechanism, Kenya. Like your music probably takes you to places that you wouldn't normally go. Your music gets you to meet people that you wouldn't normally meet. And that's what photography is for me. I can go to a tattoo convention and see sideshow performers. I can go to a jazz club. I can go to a concert. I can go to a hip hop dance battle anywhere in the world because my camera gives me permission to be there.
Yeah.
And so I get out of my corporate bubble and meet people who, frankly, don't care what I do Monday through Friday.
Right.
I can just meet them and talk, and I don't have to explain my background and what I do for a living and where I went to school. I can just be the guy with the camera. We can just talk about how great the show was.
Right.
And that's remarkably refreshing. And if photography is the ticket to that conversation, perfect.
Yes. I can only imagine that because I do think that it's funny. A lot of people who are in science and, I would say STEM in general are also very, very creative. And it's for those reasons, like just needing the outlet from the structure, from the technical, but yet needing that stimulation too, needing that challenge, needing that, the brain to move in that. And it's funny, I met you more again as Tasha's husband, as Natasha. I didn't meet you as really Keith, but once and again, I didn't know what you really did, like for it to actually like pay mortgage and things. It was like, oh, he's a creative, and then it. I think that made it even more refreshing, honestly, to see you have this role that you have. At work professionally, because it's like, yes, he has that, but that's not anything that I feel like in meeting you one-on-one, that's the titles, the labels. That's probably the thing I love the most about you and Natasha is that you both are really humble people and show up as people. And, later you find out these things. I'm like, what? Wait, what? What? And it's like, okay. So, which I love, like, because we are more than, these labels and these titles. So, okay. So now we're in our 40s. All right. We're getting closer to kind of the present. Any shifts, and this could be professionally, personally, anything that you just started noticing a little bit different, maybe as your kids got older or just life in general once we hit 40.
Interesting thing that I'm not sure you're aware of, and I don't think I told you this, but I did a 365 project for my 40th. And if you're familiar with those are, basically you pick something. Photographers will do a 365 project. We'll say every day I'm going to take a photo of whatever, and they have a subject.
Yes.
And so I bought a camera. A little camera that I could carry with me every day because this was before, iPhones were a thing, right? So I had this little camera And I decided that when I turned 39, I would take a picture every day about what was most important to me about that day. And I would write a little journal entry about it. And I did that every day for a year, which meant, and then I took all of those photos and journal entries and put them into a book because it's arguably my 40th year. So I have a book on my bookshelf called Year 40, and it literally has my entire 40th year every day. And what I realized at the end of that day, Kenya, was at the end of that year, was there were days where I woke up and I knew exactly what I was going to take a picture of. Like today, I would have just taken a picture of this screen and been like, I'm talking to my friend Kenya. This is the cool part of the day. And there were other days where I got into bed and I was like, crap, I didn't take a picture, and I have to get up and take a picture in the hotel room. Right? It's like, the hotel door or something stupid like that. But what I realized is when I put all that next to each other, Kenya, the days that I was happiest or most excited or felt the most fulfilled when I went to bed were the days where I went into it knowing what I was going to do, what I was going to take that picture of. And it was like this whole notion of like, every day should be special. It shouldn't be like you have some good days. And this is why I mentioned earlier, like we don't think like my birthday's in a month, it's going to be amazing. Well, okay, well, what are you going to do a month from now? You might get hit by a bus tomorrow. Why don't you do that this weekend? Why wait?
Yes.
Right. And so it just gave me this idea that like every day should be special if you can, because that project, and I can literally go through the book and realize like, wow, that day really sucked. And I had nothing. I woke up with nothing to look forward to.
Wow.
And then I also had in that same year some career changes. I have the day I texted my boss and said, I'm in. I have that text in the book where I took my new job in recruiting and left the partnership at the firm. I had an injury where I broke my leg at the company soccer tournament.
I do remember you with a broken leg.
Yeah,
I do.
like 3 surgeries later, I got food poisoning and was sick for 6 months. And so I was like, seriously, like, so I had a lot going on in that year. And I came out of it, still standing. And I took this new job that was, I figured if I didn't like it, Kenya, I would quit in 2 years. But if I had stayed on the partner role that I was in, I probably would have had to leave in 2 years. And so I was like, well, I'll try it. If I don't like it, then I'll leave, but I would probably have more fun. And, I would leave anyway. And so I took this role and it turned out to be great. And that was almost 11 years ago now.
Wow.
That was my introduction to 40s. That was literally the year I turned 40.
Well, that was a big introduction. Because I love that now that you say 365 part, I'm like, oh yeah, I love those. I love it. I'm like, oh, I need to do it. But I know me, I'm horrible with, like, I would be the person with a bunch of doors at the end of the day. Like, oh, shoot.
Right. But it was helpful for me, Kenya, when you're grinding, right? I spent my 30s grinding, trying to get promoted to manager, trying to get promoted to partner with the boys running around. It was cool to take a minute. And I don't journal. I think a lot about things, but I'm not writing stuff. It was really great for me to take that time to document every day.
Yeah.
I had never done anything like that before.
Yeah.
It totally did.
Yeah, I love that. Now, I will admit, I talk with close friends about this a lot lately. I think me being 50 and reflecting, I'm no longer married but I was married 21 years, and, my kids are a little bit younger than yours. My oldest is 21, and then my youngest is a senior in high school this year. So he's 17, but I reflect a lot on, like, and I've talked about this on my podcast. My ex-husband is a really wonderful man. Like, he's a good person. And, we had shifts in our relationship, but we co-parent, and he's a good person. And I think about the males in my life, male friendships, and my friends and their husbands, being really wonderful people and very educated. At the same time, I worry sometimes about the fact that as a father, it's like, I've got to pay for this stuff. Like, I've got to make sure we have security. I've got to make sure, that my job is tight. And I sometimes worry, don't lose you though. You know what I mean? Like, cause I feel like so many, as we are aging, people are like, but what about me? Like, they're going in these weird spirals. And so hearing you say that day to day, like, is that pause? And I wonder if this sabbatical, and so this is what leads me to this question. What prompted you to say, okay, I want to take a sabbatical and do this?
So the very short version is, in 2013, I had been a partner for 5 years. There's sort of an up or out promotion somewhere in year 6 to 8. I'm not sure I was in a great position to get it, but I was doing fine. So I wasn't going to be asked to leave anytime soon. but I pretty much knew that like in 3-4 years, it was probably going to be time for me to move into a new role. But I have this perk at work where I, as a partner, I can take a sabbatical. And so I went to my mentor, a friend, and I was about to ask for a sabbatical. I'd sort of gotten the whole script in my head laid out because I prepped for everything.
Yeah.
And before I even got to ask, he said, actually, I'm not sure. I've seen people with your profile, and I think it'll be very hard for you to get promoted. But I want you to take this global consultant recruiting job and work for me. And I was like, wait, dude, I've been working on this script for like the last month. Like, at least let me finish my lines.
Let me finish my line.
Yeah, and so it raised the whole question of, financially, what does it mean to step off the partner track? Like, say, if I was a better partner, it would have been a bigger pay cut. But we had a number, and the number he gave me was above our number by a lot. And I said, well, I'll do it. And like I said, the true story, right? If I had stayed as a partner, I probably would have had to leave in 3 years. But if I did this recruiting job, I'd do 2 seasons, and if I like it, I'll stay. And if I don't, like I said, I'll have more fun in the 2 years. And so that I didn't get to take the sabbatical, Kenya, because in 2013, I moved over to an EVP role and left the partnership, and EVPs don't get a sabbatical.
Okay.
And in 2022, I was having lunch with a friend at a partner meeting in Ireland. And I said, how's it going? I know you weren't feeling your role. And she goes, well, actually, I'm about to take a sabbatical. And I said, well, we're EVPs. What are you talking about? She goes, well, I think they got wind that I wasn't happy and was thinking of moving on. And they created one for EVPs.
Okay.
Kenya, do you know I flew home on Sunday, and Monday I had the paperwork in my inbox? So a decade later, the benefit ended up back on. The boys were out the house. And in 2022, 18 months ahead of time, I put a sabbatical on the books for January 24. And then spent the better part of those 18 months trying to come up with a project that I could do creatively that would string all the places together. So that's how that came about. And it's been great. We're about 3.5 months into it. I've got 2.5 more months off work. And it's been a blessing.
Yeah, so this is I gotta go here because I do think well, maybe because my brain is in that space. So, when you're thinking of something, like if you like, ooh, I think I want a white car, then you see white cars everywhere. But sabbatical is this thing for me that I've been thinking a lot more about. And I feel like everywhere I go, that word is coming up. Because I don't know, I want people to understand that sabbaticals, yes, you can have a sabbatical that's more formal where a job, career actually offers it and so forth. But I just think in life, period, no matter what you're doing, we all need these pauses, these deliberate sabbatical pauses. Yeah.
Kenya, somebody asked me, I'll pause there. Somebody asked me, about doing the travel that we're doing and the sabbatical and the pause, and I don't know that I could have taken it 10 years ago the way I'm doing it now. And so there's a little bit of a sweet spot. I'm young enough that I can do some of the adventurous things that I want to do and carry my 30 pounds of camera gear around with me. It's the heaviest bag that we travel with. But I'm also old enough that I can afford to do it the way that I would want to do it. I'm not staying in hostels. I'm not a backpacker. Don't put me in your tent, right? We're not sharing a meal. Right. And so if I had done it 20 years ago, or even 10 years ago, when it was 4 of us, we wouldn't have been doing it this way. But if I had done it 10 years from now, when I was ready to retire, I don't know that physically I would have been able to do the hikes and do the climbs and do the things that we wanted to do. And we've met a lot of really awesome people on the trips that we've taken so far. So far, we've done 5.5 weeks in South America. We just got back from 6 weeks in Asia, and we're doing 7 weeks, hopefully leaving in a little while. And we've met a lot of different types of people. And there are people who, for one reason or another, have chosen to do it later in their lives. And they're not doing it quite the same way we are. And so there is a sweet spot in there. And so it's not that you take a sabbatical because you can. I think there's something to be said about it being the right time for you and your family. We're empty nesters now. One of our boys is out working, I like to say, off the payroll. And so we can travel with just the two of us.
Congratulations.
Yes, thank you. The other thing that you didn't mention, but I think it's important to keep in mind. I've tried to surround myself with people that have similar worldviews as I do. And I have friends that have taken sabbaticals and taken that time off and have made adjustments to their career because it was right for them. I also have friends that I like to say, look at their bank account and try and run up the score. And that's not what I'm about.
Yeah.
Right. And so
Yeah.
it's a little bit easier in some ways to do if you're around people that value what you described you would get out of some time away, as
Yeah.
opposed to people who are thinking, well, what are you going to do financially, and how much is that going to cost you, and this, that, and the other. We're doing it. It's not cheap.
No.
It is a paid sabbatical, but it's not cheap the way we're doing it.
Yeah.
But the people that are supporting us and encouraging us are people that understand what it's like to travel with your spouse and to see the world and check so many things off your list. That makes it a little
Yeah.
bit easier, I think. And a lot of people that I know haven't surrounded themselves with people that would encourage them for what's good for them. They would encourage you based
Yes.
on what they're about. And so you just try not to
Exactly.
hang out with those people.
Right. Well, to your point, yes. I mean, and that's a you're stating a bigger thing, and it kind of was segueing a little bit into what I was bringing up about, some of the Black male friends that I have. Who are we keeping up with? Are we keeping up with this status? I kind of have this thing, and I don't want to say I'm anti
Hmm.
this, but I think we have to be careful when we talk about Black excellence, because, and meaning kind of this excellence, we're going to do everything, all the things, all the time. But what about you? Like, what about what you need? What are your primal needs? How, like you're talking about
Yeah.
your family. You're laughing. So tell me, what's the laugh
Well,
for?
I'm laughing because you said a bunch of things that triggered a bunch of conversations I had with friends. One of them is, when we have Black consultants join the firm, they always want to help me with recruiting. We need to get more of us in here. And how can I do this? I said, look, the best thing you can do to help my recruiting is kick ass in your day job. Like,
Yes.
get back to work. Right. And I think that, but that's what you're talking about. It's the self-care that you
Yeah.
talked about, right? It's
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
best thing you can do to achieve Black excellence is make sure you're healthy and make sure you're a
Yes.
good role model in terms of how to do things sustainably. I tend to think of my weeks when I was working, when I go back to work, in what I call sustainable 7-day blocks.
Mm,
And
mhm,
I work every weekend, I work every night,
mm,
but I take my time when I want it. And if I don't have any urgent
mm.
meetings on Monday morning, my assistant will block the morning and I'll go to breakfast with Tasha. She
Right.
knows that if I have one meeting at 3 in the afternoon, either cancel it or move it earlier and give me my afternoon off. And so when I look at my
Yeah,
calendar every Sunday, my breaks aren't 6 o'clock. I shut the laptop. Saturday, Sunday, I'm off. My breaks might be Wednesday afternoon and Friday
yeah,
morning and all day
yeah,
Saturday. And for me, that works because I'm a photographer and the light's good
yeah.
on Wednesday afternoon. The light's not good
Right,
Friday night. Right. Um, and so
right,
I
right.
try and plan it that way, but I that works for me. And that
Mhm,
allows me to bring my best self to my home, to my spouse, to my kids, to my job, to my coworkers, to my mentees, because I do
mhm.
make sure that I prioritize my own time. And that
Yeah,
allows me to
yeah.
achieve excellence the way I'm defining it. I also try and
Yeah.
remember that work should, to me, fund the lifestyle, not be the
Yes.
lifestyle.
Not be the lifestyle. Okay, so now that's the point to me
But that's
too,
me.
and
That's me. And if that's
yeah,
not
yeah.
you, that's fine. But we probably shouldn't talk about, should I go to this meeting or be home for my anniversary? Because you're going to give one answer and I'm going to give a different one.
Right, right. But I
And,
think you're adding to the conversation. I mean, I don't know how much we talk about it this way though. And so I agree, everybody is different. You got to do what works for you, but we also need to hear more people's stories and how people are doing things, and not assume that if you have a certain kind of position or title, that means it's just all about the work or it's just all about the dollars. But to your point, I that's how I look at work as well. It's like, okay, people ask me, how can you do all these things? Like, you're still a creative, and I am about to do another show finally, because I've been in like sabbatical or whatever, I don't know, hiatus. And it's like, I do the things that I love to do, but I also don't, work can't just be this. I have very clear boundaries. Now that I'm back in a university setting, and they know that about me, they're like, oh, don't try to reach Kenya during this or that because she's not going to do it. I'm like, no, because I love this work and I am committed to it, and I love my life and these other things that I, really want to be about. So
yeah.
it's
And I
critical.
get it all done though, right? I don't want
Mhm.
people to take away that you can sort of half-ass it at work and do just enough. I don't think anybody would question how hard I work. I don't need as much sleep as people. And, for you, like doing a show might actually give you energy, and you might be exhausted at the end of the week, but if you can be on stage, you're going to be there. That's how I am with some of the things I like to do outside of work. They actually, my downtime, my sabbatical downtime, I'm producing a podcast. I just got back. I'm somewhere around 10,000 photos in Asia over the last 6 weeks.
Oh my gosh.
I taught myself audio editing. I taught myself WordPress to put up the website. Like, that's what I'm doing in my downtime, Kenya.
Yes. No, we're talking to the choir. Like, no, although I will admit at this point, see, my kids are not empty nest. I still got a senior. So I said, okay, you still gotta, oh my gosh. Okay. So time is flying. We're already at our 30-minute, but I want to make sure you talk a bit before we go to our bonus about My Home is Special. So tell the folks about this podcast, how they can listen.
Yep. Respecting the clock.
Yeah.
Respecting the clock, I will give a quick version. So one of the things we wanted to do with the sabbatical was travel. We had a list of places. Tasha actually keeps a list on her phone of places we want to go. And we never go to the same place twice. So we've never gone back to a place because there's so many things that we want to see that we're like, we'll see it right when you go because we're not coming back until we've seen everything. So she keeps a list on her phone, and we have been knocking out 2 or 3 a year. And we realized it would be like 90 by the time we get through this list. So when I decided to take the time off, we said, well, let's go knock out a bunch of these things all at once. So I think we're 10 countries in. When all is said and done, we'll be like 16 countries. And we're just checking the list. Angkor Wat, Machu Picchu, the pyramids, like we're doing it. We're doing all the things. And so I decided I wanted to do a photography project that puts it all together. And I was like, Tasha said, well, your podcast for work beyond the bio is really good. You should do a podcast. And I said, well, I want to take pictures. And so then this whole thing became like, how do I put the two together in a way that will allow me to go to all the countries? I was like, maybe I'll do countries on the equator. I'm like, I don't want to go back to some of those places. And that has nothing to do with like Vietnam. So anyway, I decided that what I would do was talk with people and take photos as we go. At one point, Kenya, and I just want to mention this because at one point I was actually thinking about interviewing people about their views of America in all the countries that I go and see what they thought of America. And what was fascinating was the realization that that is a remarkably arrogant American way to think about it. Because you know what I'm realizing? They don't think about America. We are not thinking about it. It turns out we are not the center of their universe. So I'm glad I didn't do that. So My Home is Special. What I'm doing is because of the different circles that I operate in, both professionally and artistically, I just ended up knowing a lot of people. Some are executives, some are students, some are creatives, some are, just people from all walks of life. And so I decided that I would interview people from every country that I'm going to that are from those countries and consider it home, but are probably not living there at the moment. And I'm talking with them about what makes home special to them. What do they miss when they're away? If they're bringing their significant other to their home for their first time, what do they want to make sure that significant other sees because it'll understand them better? And not just what's the list. I'm not looking for a list of tourist attractions, but why are they special? So Kenya, it might be that there's a park by your house that's special to you. It's not that I need to go visit the park. It's that was the park when your grandmother was watching you after church every Sunday that you would spend time with her in. And that park is special to you because of the memories it evokes. And so I'm interviewing people from every country about what's special. And then that's setting a little bit of the travel agenda when we go to those countries. We're doing those things, seeing those places, visiting those neighborhoods, seeing those spots. And I'm photographing as we go. And then when I get back, I'm doing follow-up conversations with them about how I experienced their home.
I love that.
So there's sort of a before and after podcast episode for each country. And then the website has the podcast, but then the photos that I'm taking along the way as we do and see all the amazing things that we're seeing. And we're meeting some great people and enjoying it. But that's the project, and that's what My Home is Special is. And I'm excited to start taping the after episodes for Asia.
I was gonna say, I want to hear the after. Okay, that is the after episodes creative.
Are fun. So one of the things that I do is I go to a storytelling series here in Chicago called Grown Folk Stories, and it's an open mic, 5 minutes, tell whatever you want. And the recap episodes are actually being co-hosted me and a woman that I met through Grown Folk Stories. And she's pulling out of me
God.
the stories of my trips. So I have sort of the guest on
Oh,
the front end and then a longer conversation. I like
yeah.
to say, it's a breakfast length podcast. It's like 20, 25 minutes an episode. So you can just have your morning coffee, listen, and keep it moving. It's
I
been fun.
love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. And and what I really love is that there's this global understanding, and I really want us, especially as people of color, to understand this world. The landscapes and the intimacies, the nuances, not just the tourists and the main attractions and the things that we kind of hear about places, but the livelihood. And the point that you made is like people aren't really like US there, yes, it's not that they don't have maybe a consideration or whatever, but no, like they have their own lives and livelihood. And so I really love that. So I hope you all please definitely tune in to my home is special. I have actually listened to a podcast. So and I love it. And I didn't realize that you had a whole other podcast with Bain. Like I didn't know that you were already
Yeah,
about
that's
this podcasting life. Like you already
yeah,
knew how to do
yeah.
this. Like, yeah.
Kenya, I will say for people that check it out, spoiler alert. Whether you're an executive, whether you're a student, whether you have a ton of money or you don't have a ton of money, and no matter what part of the world you're from, you think about home the same way. It is
Yeah.
remarkably how similar people are because people are
Yeah.
people.
Because
And the
people are
other
people.
thing that I would say, as you hear them describe, especially in some of the developing markets, the way they talk about the community, you'll be like, are you talking about Black folks or your culture? Are you talking about Black people or Vietnam? Are you talking about Black people or
Right.
Peru? It is
Right.
fascinating.
It's
It is
fascinating.
fascinating. It's
Yeah.
been a
And
fun
that's why
time.
it's so important I thank you for doing this work in such a fun, interesting way, because I do think, when we talk about, diversity and equity and
Mhm.
inclusion and stuff, the way that you really, to me, break through that work is to hear people's stories. You have
Yeah,
to hear people's stories. That's
yeah.
that's how we see the mirrors. That's how we see the connections. That's how we appreciate, each other, all of the things. And I love it. I love it. Okay.
Okay.
We're getting ready to go to our bonus. So I'm going to take a pause. Those of you who are listening, come on over to YouTube so that you can see us, so you can see Keith, but also so you can hear. I'm going to ask him 2 other questions that I'm not going to have recorded for the audio. So bump over there. But before I do, I know you are into music. I know this might be a hard question. Okay. I can't answer the question. I ask people this question, but I can't personally answer
Sure.
it. What is your theme song? Today, at least, a song that you're just into or always have been into.
It's funny. What I'm listening to right now probably should not be a theme song. You know, I'll give you an album because it comes to
Okay.
mind. And
Okay.
it's a guy that I've snapped a few times and we've gone back and forth. His daughter's enrolled in an Ivy League school this past year. And we were talking about that process. But there's an album called The Falling Season by Master Ace. And
Ooh.
he is an amazing storyteller. He's had 2 other albums that are great stories since then. And what was just interesting is this album is the story of him basically going away from home to a high school because of the busing situation elsewhere in New York. And it's about his time in high school and just coming of age and doing all the things in high school. And it's just an awesome story. And the journey
Yeah.
that people go on and some of the challenges they overcome, the people they meet along the way. And I just listen to that album from beginning to end all the time.
I'm definitely gonna check this out. Is there one particular, because we have a playlist, and is there a song
Oh,
that maybe just stands out for you right now? It may not be the one that you love the most, but maybe just one that stands out.
okay. I will promise you that I will get it back to you afterward. I need
That's
to look
fine.
because I just listen. I don't even know the song titles.
I know. I do that too. And you
I
know
just listen.
what?
But okay, I will get you a song, whether it's from that
Okay,
album or another song that I really appreciate.
totally
I have my
fine.
favorite MCs,
Yes.
but I will find one.
I know this is a hard question for me. I wouldn't be able to answer this. And I'm like you now. I
It is
mean, I blame streaming that I don't know the titles of all the songs I love, because a song will just,
nothing.
come and say, "Oh, I like that artist. Let me go find that artist." So I'll know the artist, but I won't know like all the names of the songs. So you're forgiven. Awesome. Yes, send that to me. We'll include it.
Okay.
This has been amazing.
I
I
will.
have two more questions I'm going to ask, but to our
Okay.
audio audience, I just want to thank everybody for tuning in and join us on YouTube because I'm going to ask two more questions. So we'll be back next week, audio listeners. All right, for our YouTube viewers, people who are watching right now. So, what advice that person that's listening to this and they're saying, I want to do something creative. I want to get started traveling. Do you have any advice for a person who's maybe just feeling pretty stagnant where they're at and want to maybe kind of flee away and do a sabbatical and just get away from their norm? I
Yeah.
mean, I know you're a planner. Maybe some planning tips help people
No, well,
how
look,
to do that.
it's a good question, and there's a couple things that come to mind. So I'll offer two pieces of advice.
Mhm.
One, I tend to think about work and ask myself three questions: what do I get paid to do? Who do I get paid to do it with? And how much do I get paid to do it? And I recognize that at different points in my life, different questions are more important than others. And I'm conscious about that. When my son was born, we moved back to Chicago. I had a new house, a new car, and a new kid. I was like, just pay me. Like, I don't care what you ask me to do. I might not even care if it's legal. I'm like, just pay me. I got bills to pay. But now,
Right.
Kenya, you've passed forward to, given our topic, after 40 and now after 50, financially, I'm going to be okay.
Mhm.
And so now it's like, well, wait, who am I going to spend all my days with? Because I don't like that person, and you can't pay me enough to do that because I can get paid enough for me working with people that I like. And so what do you get paid to do? Who do you get paid to do it with? And how much do you get paid to do it? And recognizing that those things shift around a little bit. Because that will help you decide, are you stagnant, or are you stagnant because those things are out of alignment? You're making a lot of money, but you don't like the people that you work with, and you're at a point in your life where you're like, well, this isn't what I need. Whereas, like I
Right.
said back then, I was like, just pay me. The other thing is, take your time. I had opportunities to leave and arguably make more money. I had opportunities to leave and go work with some friends. But when I looked at those three things and where I was likely to get to on a timeline that was acceptable to me, it made sense to stay. I didn't plan on staying 28 years at the same company. Like, hell, I was supposed to be gone like 15 years ago. But what I would
Yeah.
say is that every time I looked at another opportunity, I didn't just look at it as the job. I looked at it as what it meant in the context of my whole life. And being in my recruiting role when my boys were in middle school and high school, where I was arguably my boss. I mean, for a good chunk of the time, I was meeting with my boss once every other month for about 30 minutes. So when
Right.
there was
Right.
no, but what that meant, Kenya, was when there was a track meet or a parent teacher conference or a soccer game, I could be there for that.
Yes.
And I could have made more money. I might have done work that was more interesting, although this allowed me to travel a lot and bring my camera. But what it meant was that when I had two Black teenage boys in Chicago, I could be there whenever I needed to be there. And I
Yes.
don't know that people are always running that math when they're thinking about their
Yeah.
careers and their sabbatical.
Yes.
It's your
Exactly.
life, and work is one part of your life, and you should be optimizing for your life as best you can. And I would
Yeah.
encourage people to do that and look for role models and people that are doing it the way that you want to do it, and people that have similar
Mm.
values. Like I said,
Mhm.
the person who needs to upgrade their car to the latest Benz every year, if you're not about that life, maybe they shouldn't offer you advice on your career because they're going to optimize for
Oh
something
my
that's not going to
gosh.
and they're well-meaning, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's not
Absolutely.
the advice that you need. And so I've had great
Exactly.
role models, and people that are, um, in some ways, Kenya, we might be this for you, but like whose kids are like a couple years older. And I'd be like, okay,
Yeah.
help me out here. How did you not choke the hell out of him when he did that? Right. But those friends help you. Okay, the college application process, the getting a job process, the internship. Like we have friends
Yes.
whose kids are like 2 years older, and I just ride their coattails.
Yeah.
I'm like, how is your child
Well,
still alive? How did you restrain yourself? Because I'm struggling with that right now.
so I feel like I am that for because a lot of my closer
Mhm.
friends, their kids are younger than mine,
Yeah,
like just slightly, like what you're
yeah,
saying. So I feel like I'm the guinea pig. Like I'm like, well, this is what I tried, and this is what we got.
Yeah.
So, but
But
at the same
people,
time, no, go ahead. Yeah.
no, but sorry, but people, I want to make sure I answer your question directly. I think that
Yeah.
people should think about, is it that you have an itch because on Instagram you feel pressured to do it now, or is it that you really need the break for your own well-being? And I think there are
Mhm.
times where I felt like, wow, that would be amazing to do that. But Kenya, the more I look at people who seem to have that life and I get to know them a little better, I don't want their life. I want my
Yeah.
life. I like my life. And I can't say that I'd go back and change anything because I like where I am now. And if I had changed something in the past, I might be someplace different.
Yeah.
And so I would
Yeah.
encourage people to just take a longer term perspective. You don't have to do it right now.
Right.
And sometimes waiting a little bit and doing it right. The sabbatical right now, the way we're traveling, is way different than what I could have done 10 years ago.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love the patience, factor.
Yeah.
And I do think you're right with social media and just, even just watching different friends or whatever, what they might be doing, it can make you feel like, oh, I better hurry up, or yeah, I got to live today, so let me jump the cliff. But it's like,
Right.
well, but let's like be a little bit more,
Right.
retrospective and introspective on things. Well, awesome. My last question to you is pretty simple. It's just, is there a question I didn't ask that you wish I would have asked? Or is there just something else that you really want to share with everybody?
When you first asked me about the podcast, this is you didn't prep me for that question, but when you first asked me about this, I think my response was, I don't tend to think about it as before 40 or after 40 because you just never know what's going to happen, and you should try and get the most out of every day. Now, it's not like I wake up every day and I'm like, let's tackle it, guys. We're going to do it. But it's a little bit of how do you stay focused with all the distractions that you could have. And for me, I've been fortunate that Tasha and some of my closest friends help me stay on task. I have friends that will call me out on my BS, including Tasha. They just pull me aside and be like, dude, that was not okay.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
I also try and put some structures in place to help keep me disciplined. We
Mhm,
do a guys trip
mhm.
every year. It was an accident. A friend of mine, well, it's a long story, but he got a pretty terminal bleak diagnosis when he was in his 30s
Oh,
and beat it, and said he wanted to do a trip for his 40th. And we said, just tell us where and we'll be there. And it
right.
was a couple of us from school, somebody from his church, some of his line brothers, somebody they pledged. And it turns out when you have really close friends with good people, or when you're close friends with good people, they tend to have other good people around them. And we had such a good time that we were like, well, let's get together for his birthday every year. And it's been almost,
Yeah.
um, and that little bit of a reset and making sure it's almost become like it's a guy's trip, but it's almost like a retreat. We'll talk
Yeah.
about our spouse. We'll talk about our finances. Now we're starting to think about, like, how much longer are we going to work? How do we think about retirement? None of us in
Absolutely.
that group have parents that, made their money and retired young.
Right.
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 But we're in a situation where I don't need to work as long as our parent. And so putting those structures in place to make sure that you're getting the support you need,
Yeah.
and how you do that is not easy for us because we don't have a lot of role models. I don't in
Exactly.
my family. I have people that I
No,
can go to for
exactly.
advice, but they don't know. They haven't lived that.
Right.
And so maybe something along that we could have talked about at some point. But I feel like
Yeah.
the people that you're bringing on here is giving people those types of glimpses so they can see, oh, maybe there's a bit different way, and I should think about that. I don't know what it is, but I at least know that I should go find out.
Yes. No, that's exactly why I'm doing the podcast. I mean, because I'm in this experiment too.
Hmm.
I'm
Hmm.
too just attempting to create community and tribe that really mirrors the truth of who I am, as
Right.
opposed to mirroring maybe kind of what I thought I wanted to do or wanted to be. And that's
Exactly.
been an interesting thing, trying to kind of, you know, create tribe. And I say tribe as a
Yep.
woman or whatever, just community in a way that's like, I'm really, not only do I connect with you, but I'm down for you. And if I do decide like, okay, I really feel like I need to do this for myself and it feels different, can you still support me in that? Even if it's something that you feel, yeah, tell me like your thoughts, I respect you, but I still need love, I still need support, I still need to be seen.
That
And
is so true. That is so
yeah.
true. I always say, like, Anybody can give you advice. Mentors can give you advice, but your friends should respect your decision.
Yes. Yes. And still be
And
your
not take
friend.
it personally. Right. And not take it personally. Like, thank you for your input, but that's what it is. Now you need to support me because I'm going to need your support.
Yes.
It's not personal. We're not the same person.
It's not. Yes. I do think that, and I don't think I just started this little book club with some girlfriends these are from friendships that I've made throughout my whole life.
Mm-hmm.
Some girlfriends since childhood are in this. It's only like 5 or 6 of us. And we're reading this book about friendship as women, as Black women. And every month, and we call it the slow read book club because we only read one chapter a month because we're all too busy to read a whole book a month. So, but it's been so cool because we're like, I've been an awful friend because I haven't done any of these things that this book is suggesting. And we're like, oh my God, but it's been so cool because we're relearning or unlearning some things. But also, learning new things of how to show up in friendship. And this part of like, I don't take this personal, but I still got you, even if I just can't relate to that. So
maybe a little I told you so if it doesn't work out, but that's okay. That's part of the fun.
Part of the fun of friendship as well. Exactly. And I've had I have one girlfriend. She's a complete I told you so. Because she does. She tells me things. And I'm like, I don't know, but whatever. And then later, and it's like, and she's like, yeah, I told you so. I'm like, yeah, you did. But I needed to live through the pain of it all.
That's the fun of it. That's the fun of it.
Well, this has been awesome. Thank you again and again for, breezing by the podcast. Please tell your wife, because it's funny, when I first released this podcast, I guess it's been almost 2 years now, Natasha was the first person who texted me to say, oh my God, I just listened to your podcast and I have a whole different understanding of some things that you maybe were going through. And I'm like, Natasha, thank you, and so I love you both. And I didn't mention this. I got to say this. You guys have, they're holiday cards, guys. And listen, if there was a contest, and I don't think there is, but if there was a contest of the best holiday, most original holiday cards, the Bevans family. I always can look forward to something innovative in my mailbox.
Thank you for that. It wasn't stressful enough without you putting it out there. I'm thinking about it already. It's April.
I know you have to.
Thank you for dialing it up.
I used to be that person too. When I was married, my kids were younger. Yes, I love putting together holiday cards and themes. And then my life got crazy and I stopped. But I love to watch when people are still creative with and my kids, they would just be like, Mom, what are we doing? I'm like, oh my God, this is and to your point, we got to think of this stuff in April, in May, because
you got to get it together. You got to get it together. I'm on it. I got a couple more months.
No more pressure. I don't want to put any more pressure on you. Well, thank you again. I'm going to stop the recording. You stay close, stay right here. And those of you who are watching, make sure you go to, again, myhomeisspecial.com. Make sure you listen to the podcast. I will, in the show notes on Spotify and Apple, have also a way you can get in touch with Keith on LinkedIn, follow his LinkedIn profile, and learn just more. And then also his photography. All of it, though, everything is on the My Home is Special, right?
You can get to it all from My Home is Special. Yep.
And you may see someone in his pictures. Hint, hint. Yes, he has photographed me. So, and one of those images, I think the main one you have, the I Am project, that was one of my major shots that I put for promoting, me performing. So it's one of my favorites. So, awesome. All right, that is enough. All right, you guys have a good day and stay right here, Keith, and we'll talk to you guys later. Bye.